senior producer from NFL Films, Greg Cosell, who's going to be joining us here on the line for an update on the X's and O's for Bills Cardinals. His weekly segment is presented by Scott Lawnyard, an official commercial site work partner of the Buffalo Bills. Greg, thanks for hanging in there and for joining us. We appreciate it. I guess we should begin here. We look at the Cardinals team, and obviously they add a major weapon on offense in Marvin Harrison Jr. They have Trey McBride. Those are the chief weapons in the passing game. Connor, we know, is an accomplished back. Do you anticipate their offensive approach changing dramatically, or do they just drop Harrison in and kind of still be what they are identity-wise?
I would say they'll be what they are because you have to play to your quarterback, and I think, I knew I'd be talking about the Arizona Cardinals with you guys. So a couple of weeks ago, I watched every one of Kyler Murray's snaps from last year, every one of his dropbacks, because he played, I think, only 7 or 8 games coming off that ACL. Right. And Murray is one of those guys that you obviously have to be very concerned about making those special second reaction outside of structure plays. There's no question he can make in any given game 3, 4, 5 of those that can break your back. But if you talk about sort of playing the position with nuance, with detail, with subtlety, he's not that guy. And, he's very overly reactive to opposing jersey color. Now, he has a strong tendency to perceive pressure, but that's a double-edged sword because sometimes he'll perceive pressure, then get out of the pocket and make one of those plays. But if you're thinking of him in terms of playing within structure, they have to do a really, really good job of getting the primary receiver open, and that's, of course, where Marvin Harrison comes into play, because the longer he's in the pocket, the more likely he is to just break down. So, he's really at his best when he can hit the back foot, deliver the ball, because pressure's not a factor in that scenario. The coaching staff has to really design concepts for him so it's clean. But so it's a real dichotomy because he can make those plays outside of structure, but he's really not a great quarterback.
What are the classic ways people defend a quarterback like that? Do they spy him? Do they rush
Sometimes.
3? Do they rush in their, they stay in their lanes like they try to do with Josh Allen a little bit? They don't, you don't do X stunts and that kind of thing. What's the philosophy?
Normally, you try to squeeze the depth of the pocket because the interior of the O-line is responsible for the depth of the pocket. So that's what you're trying to squeeze. You're trying to squeeze the depth of the pocket so that he doesn't see well. I mean, at the end of the day, he's 5'10". Now, because he's always been short, he has mastered the ability to make good throws kind of falling away. He can do that because he's had to throughout his career. But that's what you're trying to do. You're trying to squeeze him so that he really can't see and he can't step up. But you always have to have a plan to make sure that he doesn't beat you by breaking contain and running with the football. Obviously he makes great runs. He's not necessarily a guy that makes a ton of passes on the move. He's much more of a runner than a thrower on the move. And very often his deeper balls lose energy on the back end, particularly if he's a little tight in the pocket. But he's the classic discussion these days of what is the balance between the guys who can make plays and how good or maybe not so good are they from the pocket? What's the balance there? Because he's not great from the pocket, but he can burn you.
Yeah.
Right.
Looking at their defense, they're kind of up a creek in terms of their pass rush. B.J. Ojulari's out for the season after tearing an ACL last month. And now Darius Robinson, their 27th overall pick in round 1, is out for the first 4 weeks, getting put on the injury list. So it looks like it's up to Zaven Collins to generate pass rush for them off the edge. How much of a concern is that for their pass rush hopes?
Yeah, they're an interesting defense, though, Brownie, because Jonathan Gannon is pretty creative in what he does. And last year they started to do some things that were a little different. I mean, if you watch their tape toward the end of the season, they play a lot of what we call 5-1 fronts, 5 across, 1 stacked backer, which can be a big problem in the run game at times. But what they do behind that is they would almost play sort of three across. In other words, they would take their slot corner and he'd be back at kind of quarters depth safety level with the other two safeties. So they'd kind of play three across on the back end, and you wouldn't know who the add-in defender would be in the run game. It could be the middle guy. It could be one of the guys on the edge, not on the edge, but on the outside of that three across. And it can pose some problems for who you have to block as an offensive lineman because you just don't know who that add-in defender is going to be. But they don't have that one pass rusher that you're truly concerned about. And they don't have great players on the defensive side of the ball as individual players. So, theoretically, it's a beatable defense. I think, look, right now, I guess, who's going to be the corners? Is it on the outside? Is it Murphy, Bunting, and Thomas? Is that who are going to be the outside corners?
Or Garrett Williams.
Well, Garrett Williams is their nickel.
Was their nickel. He was their slot a year ago.
Yeah, he's their nickel.
He's better suited to that.
It might be Melton, the rookie.
Yeah, if the rookie from Rutgers, Max Melton, might get an opportunity to play on the outside. He was a second-round pick. Right. You normally draft a corner in the second round. You'd like to see him play some. But, they just don't have enough talent on the defensive side where they have playmakers, guys who can make impact plays and change games.
So what happens, Greg, when you get, say, for instance, let's say all their hopes and dreams come true in Marvin Harrison Jr., right? He's everything. He's like Jamar Chase. Yeah. He's like Justin Jefferson. He's all that guy. How does he, even if he's that guy, what does that do to their offense when you just drop him in? And let's say he is everything they hope he could be. Is Murray the guy that can get him the ball? Is this offensive line, what does his target share do to this offense?
Well, Steve, you played in a league with great receivers, and, he can win one-on-one. And, it's still a matchup league in many ways. It's a numbers. The pass game is about numbers, matchup, spacing. He can win one-on-one matchups. That's what you're hoping. And by the way, they do have pretty good skill players. Michael Wilson is a young receiver in his second year. He's a big physical receiver. He's a pretty good player now. Don't sleep on him. McBride is a really good tight end who can line up anywhere in the formation. He's not just an attached player. And they've got two pretty good backs. We know about Connor. He's been in the league. He's a good player. I really like Trey Benson coming out of Florida State. So I don't know what their plan is in terms of the division of labor. But they've got good skilled players. Now they're moving Paris Johnson from right tackle to left tackle. In watching their tape in those whatever number of games it was that I watched Murray, I thought there were times he struggled a bit at right tackle. We'll see how he handles left tackle. But Marvin Harrison can win one-on-one, and that changes everything for a quarterback because if Murray feels comfortable throwing it to him one-on-one and he's going to make those catches, that changes your offense.
Right. Speaking of offense, the $100 million question is exactly what Buffalo's offense is going to look like under Joe Brady. Some people wonder, was he just triaging the offense last year to just play winning football, and what will be his true stamp on the offense this year as permanent OC? With all of the turnover at the receiver position, Greg, with 4 new guys of the 5 at the receiver position, is it logical to think he will lean on the running game early while the passing game finds its footing?
Very possible, and I made it a point to watch a ton of James Cook. I actually did that this week because I wanted to, be prepared to talk to you guys today and really revisit James Cook from a year ago. And I got to tell you what really stood out to me, guys, how multiple their run game was. You think obviously everybody thinks about the Bills as Josh Allen. But I thought their run game was really multiple. I thought they did a lot of things. I really like the way James Cook runs the ball. Now, granted, he's not a 215-pound back. He runs hard, but he's not purely powerful because he's not that big. And obviously, we'll see what Davis, how he's deployed within the context of their run game. But I thought it was a really impressive run game in terms of the multiplicity of concepts.
Yeah, and we talk a lot about why James Cook was, so intriguing when he came out. He can catch the ball. He can run with the ball. He's not a big dude, but he is versatile. And when Joe Brady took over, the team started to run the ball a lot more in run or pass situations, in those
situations.
neutral situations. And Cook seemed to thrive in that, and so did Ty Johnson, and of course Ray Davis may do that this year. Is there a scenario you can think of where the Bills do become this team that runs at 50-50 or thereabouts? And
yeah, I don't think anybody really runs at 50-50, Steve, but I know what you're saying.
Yeah.
Will it become, more balanced, to use the cliched word? It could. I mean, look, I've always been a believer, and I know the league is not like this, but I've always been a believer in putting your quarterback under center, running the ball. I think play action under center is more effective play action than play action in the gun. So, we'll see. But, look, besides the multiplicity of the run game conceptually, I thought Cook really looked good. And you're so right. I mean, he had far more carries once Brady took over. Clearly, he's not going to have 25 like he had against the Cowboys on a weekly basis. That's not going to happen. But I think the run game will be an important part. And then I think you get the play action pass game with Josh under center. It just, to me, that's a better way to run play action. I think it has a greater effect on the defense. And not only the second level defenders, which everybody automatically thinks of, but if you're going to have some run action, particularly with an outside zone element, then don't forget the D-line, their first move is lateral, not vertical toward the quarterback. So, we'll see how it goes. We just don't know. But I was really impressed with Cook in the run game as a whole when I watched, because what I did is I watched all the runs from when Brady took over.
Yeah.
Right.
And they were 52% run over those last 7 games. So,
Yeah.
pretty impressive.
Does that
number
include
there.
Josh as well?
I'd have to go back and look to know for
Yeah,
sure.
because I mean, I'd be surprised if they are 50-50. Maybe they'd be 58-42, which in today's NFL would be viewed as really good balance.
Yeah, I do know this. They averaged almost 37 carries a game, which led the league over that span.
Yeah, and I'm sure Josh would be part of that. And again, we'll see how much they want to do with that. Obviously, in winning situations, you're going to do that.
Yeah.
But he is, not that he's old, but he is getting older. You got to be a little careful. It just, look, no matter how big and strong and tough, and we know all that about Josh. That's not my point.
Yeah.
But the body can only handle so much.
The last one for me concerns another guy who we could see lining up in the backfield a good deal, and that's Curtis Samuel. So he obviously has already spent time with Joe Brady, having played under him for a season plus in Carolina. And one of the main reasons Joe Brady said he wanted him here is because he is smart enough to handle a multitude of assignments. So it looks like he's going to be a Swiss Army knife here in this offense. Where do you think fans should be looking for him to line up? Or is the easy answer everywhere?
I'd be curious if Joe Burrow spent a lot of the offseason looking at the 49ers because, Curtis Samuel, theoretically, in terms of deployment, could end up being very much like Deebo Samuel. And don't forget, he did that at Ohio State. I mean, this is not brand new to him. So he's done that throughout his career. I would expect them to do that because that can pose problems. And by the way, because of James Cook, who can detach from the formation, and I'm not making an apples to apples comparison, so I don't want people listening to think that I'm saying that these players are the same as McCaffrey and Deebo Samuel. That's not my point. They're not the same players, but we're talking about deployment of personnel, and you can do that with those two players.
Yeah, and as we get in to this game and how this team is going to be different, the interesting thing is this offensive line for the Buffalo Bills has been, I mean, we've almost pushed it to the side saying, oh, that's something we don't have to worry about. And certainly with the amount of veterans they have up front and a guy behind them, you would think that. Is there a reason to think the Bills will lean on that and just say, listen, we're gonna do that? Because it's just until we find out about Keon Coleman and Curtis Samuel and Mac Hollins and MVS, we're gonna hand it off a little bit here to find out and find our legs. Is there?
There's a chance.
Do you think?
I mean, I think that depends on how games flow. Clearly, I mean, Are they going to come out and be, quote unquote, a running team, like the Tennessee Titans were, when they had Derrick Henry? I would think it won't be quite like that, Steve. But yeah, I mean, there's one change in their O-line, but it's with a player who was there last year who got meaningful snaps as their 6-0 lineman, David Edwards. He'll play left guard. They'll move McGovern to center. So it's essentially the same group. So they're not really working in anybody new that's not familiar with their schemes and their systems. And Aaron Kromer is one of the better O-line coaches in the league, clearly. So could they line up and try to be a physical team? Sure. And by the way, I don't think anybody would say there's anything wrong with trying to be a physical team and attack, the opponent that way. That's never a bad thing in football.
We've been kind of chuckling to ourselves that, sometimes you got to peel Josh off the ceiling, right? Because like in that opening game last year in the New York, he's throwing the thing all over the yard, ends up with 3 interceptions, and they lose by in overtime, that kind of thing. And sometimes he's got, these energy issues, like sugar high Josh, right? Could the coaching staff say, listen, we're not going to let that happen. We're going to let Josh have a game like they did in Dallas last year. This is a team in Arizona's defense where we think we can control the line of scrimmage. We're not going to let Josh throw the ball to the other team this week. We're just going to take the win and get out of here.
Again, you could easily make the argument that they should start a game and give Josh very basic no-read, one-read type throws, tunnel screens, conventional screens, boot action, keep it simple. Let him get comfortable. Don't ask him. Look, it's going to get to be 3rd and 9 at some point, no question. But don't start the game by asking him to drive the ball down the field because, look, Josh has a little bit of that Brett Favre in him. And there's nothing wrong. Brett Favre was the first ballot Hall of Famer, but he's got a little bit of that mindset to his game. Wouldn't you agree, Steve?
Yeah, he's going to shoot first and ask questions later. Yeah, that's what he's going to do. Yeah, and I would say if you're a coaching staff who has an idea that he may do that, maybe this offensive line is the place you go to say, listen, we're going to let them carry the load for a minute until the second half or until you...
give him easy throws. Get him completion. Get him comfortable. Let him settle into the game. Give him snag flat to the boundary. It's a one-read throw. Give him basic stuff where, he doesn't have to drop back and read it out and think, oh, man, I'm going to drive that ball 22 yards down the field, which, of course, he's more than capable of. But that might not be the way you want to start games.
Right.
Last thing, very quickly before we let you go, NFL Network's Mike Garafolo is reporting, and now the team has made it official that Spencer Brown has signed a 4-year contract extension. Just your thoughts on the right tackle.
Well, I'm going to tell you because I haven't studied him individually in great detail, so I'm going to tell you that I had a chance this summer to speak to Aaron Kromer, and Aaron Kromer really, really likes him. And I'm sure that played into the re-signing of him. So I'll leave it at that because, like I said, I'm not going to sit here and say, I know everything Spencer Brown does. I try not to talk about the things, Brownie, I don't know a lot about.
Understood.
But, I can tell you that Aaron Kromer really likes him as a player, so I'm sure that factored into it.
Yeah, he got, it's been reported, he got the 3rd highest performance.
No, that was what he got last year.
Oh, that's what he got last year. Yeah, that's what he got. That's what I'm saying. He got last year, Spencer Brown got the 3rd highest performance-based paycheck bump. Just bonus check in the NFL for just shy of $1 million, and now the Bills recognize him for that as well.
Yeah.
He's a guy that started all 17 games like most of the Bills' offensive linemen did last year, and the Bills tie him up.
Yeah, I mean, look, very often when you have a quarterback like Josh Allen, you always think that we don't think about the offensive line. We think, oh, well, Josh is just going to make plays. But, the offensive line, if you're a team that has a really good O-line and a really good D-line, then you're going to be a competitive team, and that's, you can't skimp on your O-line and your D-line no matter what the rest of your team looks like.
All right, Greg, enjoy week 1. We'll catch up with you next week for week 2. It's a short week for us. We got Thursday night football coming up next week in week 2.
That's right, you got the Thursday night game, so we'll figure it out next week, guys.
Yeah,
all right, man.
Thanks, Greg.
Thanks,
Appreciate
Greg.
it.